I'm going to talk through a little bit about the 425 million APE. We saw that AMC has entered an agreement with Citigroup to issue at any time. Just walk through a little bit what I saw in the filings and what I personally think about it, give you some food for thought, and of course you can always decide what you yourself think about it. So what you're going to see is some screenshots from, there's an 8K filing they did, and then there's a prospectus for the stock that basically Citigroup would have filed. And so I guess the first thing is, you can see from the 8K, there's just language around this gives AMC financial flexibility, which makes sense. He even said when APE was announced, this is like a currency, and trade currency for something else of value, in this case for cash. And so I'm personally still pretty happy about that. I think it matches the thesis, matches the DD of everything we've seen about this. What you need to see though too is it's not just suddenly there's going to be a 425 million share dump. You're going to see some language in here about AMC keeping a lot of control over how many shares go out, when they go out, at what price they go out, and all of that. So I would just say when APE was issued, my DD personally, and I know I wasn't the only one, was essentially that this was a great tool in Adam's back pocket. What I would say is, if I were him, and this is speculative, if I thought either some kind of run was coming or I had some sort of strategy I wanted to implement around the finances, then I would want to set this up before I need it. You've probably heard the saying, better to have something and not need it than need it and not have it. So I'm sure there are plans for how to use this, but I'm also suggesting it doesn't mean everything happened today or even in the next couple days. So we'll just have to find out. We'll see that with the filings, and we'll go as we go. So first off, you see the language like the company is not even obligated to sell anything here. This is, like I said, just setting up the opportunity. They work with Citigroup as the sales agent, and it allows AMC to keep control. So it's not Citigroup that has the control here. AMC will sort of tell them when to hit the trigger, hit the button. On the timing, the amount, and the pricing of any future sales, subject to market conditions. So that's basically them saying, we'll watch the market, we'll decide when it looks like we should issue some. And then, we'll find out on the back end, seeing announcements that they sold X amount of shares and pulled in, Y amount of cash. And then a little bit about fees. So you can see there's kind of a fee structure with Citigroup, basically just saying they get their cut. So on like the first $250 million of sales, Citi gets 2.5%. On the next $250 million, they get 1.5%. And then after that, it's some rate that we don't really get to see here. So pretty standard stuff there. They touched in the language something that I've kind of found odd, that APE's been lower priced than AMC, but if you think about it, every APE has the same amount of voting power that an AMC share has, a common share. And even Adam's language previously, and then also here, you can see that APE is designed to have the same economic and voting rights. You can kind of see that in here, as a share of AMC. And you all know too that in the future, if the board ever puts to a vote, we can vote to convert APE into AMC as well. So that's kind of, all of that really makes me feel like maybe someday they'll be around the same price as each other, but obviously they're acting pretty different. Because of course you don't have options on APE, and they're both shorted at different levels, have different levels of borrowed shares and things like that. But just kind of interesting to note that it was included in the language that essentially, so you can see, because they're basically one-to-one, that they would potentially have a price correlated to each other, is really all that's saying. I just found that interesting. And then the prospectus itself, interesting that they actually called us out. They called you guys out. So strong and atypical retailer investor interest. I thought that's interesting. So this is kind of describing to anyone who might want to buy the shares, hey, you need to know there are a lot of retail folks who own this, and they seem pretty passionate. That's how I read this. And it's like, yes, of course we are very passionate and we're not going anywhere. But even look at, it's calling out social media, online forums. So this is like a really standard stock prospectus, and yet we got language in here directly referencing us. So I thought that was kind of fun. Just a reminder, they've issued shares previously, so that's actually in their language. So this is from the prospectus here, from basically that year and a half, not quite 2 years, Um, there was this amount of shares that have been issued of AMC itself. The most notable, kind of the last one that I recall, in fact, you see I've included it. This was an article from the internet. You can kind of look this up. Mudrick, people like to bash Mudrick that day, but actually, I think sometimes we all could do a little more DD on how price action works. And what happened that day is Mudrick bought 8.5 million shares, but they actually sold them into the market right away. So in many ways, they were kind of what Citigroup's going to be here. They were a facilitator to get shares into the market. And people kind of bashed them up and down, oh, what dummies they sold and whatever. But what happened too is those shares, because there was a lot of buying interest in those shares, it created a lot of buying action. And what's buying action? Well, that's price action that goes up. And so from the time Mudrick sold those, I don't remember the exact price they sold them at. I'll just call it like 23 bucks, and it ended at 32 that day or something. And overall on that day, the stock went up 23%. So you can say dilution, dilution, dilution. Stock went up 23% on a day that 8.5 million shares were issued at that time. And that was already at a high price. Uh, and the next day was our big day, 96% you can see on the day. And actually, it was quite a bit higher on the intraday price. So just really important to understand, obviously past events don't always have to repeat. It's not a promise of future performance, but the last time there was so-called dilution, we went up and rocketed big time. So just keep in mind, and the other thing is, if we really are holding, then what is really exchanging hands out there? What's actually being sold? So when there's, let's call it real shares introduced into the system, if there are funds who want those shares, if there are institutions who want those shares, and if there's retail who wants those shares, you'll get some days of a lot of buying. And so that can be really positive for us. And I believe that Adam kind of understands that and knows the timing of how and when to do this. And in some ways, I'm thinking of it as win-win, because he injects sort of these shares into the system that create upward price action, while AMC gets cash to strengthen the balance sheet, which we'll talk more about as well. Okay, interestingly, the prospectus also actually talks about the short squeeze. And you can just see the language right here. But, I just thought that was really of note that it's right there, and they've added a specific language, and that has happened before. Look at this language too. May be currently basically happening and could happen again. That there's a lot of volatility, and you could see short squeezes in this stock. I thought that's interesting. And then check this out. To the extent aggregate, so like total, short exposure exceeds the number of shares, blah, 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 available for purchase on the market. I mean, what's our thesis, right? That is what has happened. And so they're saying, hey, if there's basically more shorts than what the shorts can go actually find if they need to cover, it's going to get real spicy. That's how I read this. So come back to this later if you want to read it for yourself and translate it. But you can just see, and I've kind of quoted it here too, for you. And then just kind of another reminder that they will determine both the price and the amounts of shares as they go. So it's not going to happen all in one move. So you can see the actual number of basically APE will issue at any one time is uncertain. So they just kind of get to decide as they go and pull the trigger on certain amounts. And then they actually said, there's language in here that essentially they're going to use this to pay off debt, but you can see there's a few other things. So it's a source of financing. They'll use the proceeds primarily to pay, refinance, redeem, or repurchase existing indebtedness. So that's where you can kind of see that. But there's also other language I did not include here, and I think I just kind of word that, I guess here. Basically, management is keeping the authority to manage, and that's pretty standard kind of legal language that they're saying, hey, we're mostly intending to use this for debt, but we reserve the right to make other decisions. Like maybe if a company came to them and wanted them to buy them and they thought it was a great opportunity, maybe they'd use that cash for mergers and acquisitions, something like that. So for me, kind of wrapping it up, I just think it's more of what we all already saw coming, and we're just seeing Adam prepare everything. And that's great. I mean, if you're a tactician or a strategist, you prepare your moves in advance. You don't wait until it's too late. So whether he does this, tomorrow and we start seeing filings already, whether he does this in a month, whether he does this in a year, he's got himself positioned. If I mean, the bullish case, I suppose, and there's a little bit of hope in this, is maybe he thinks there could be a run coming soon, and he's positioned that he can sell and basically not have to sell as many shares, when there's a run. Even if that's not the case, I look at past history and I see how well they've done. I see how it strengthened the company, and obviously that's what I want. I'm here not just for myself, but to save a company that I love and to save the employees of that company, and also to stop a lot of corruption. So I think that's something we all care about. So overall, I remain very bullish. And actually, I want to just take a side note off of this. Today was kind of a tougher day on the price action, and sometimes that brings out emotions in everybody. And so for me, what I come back to is, I shared in another video and another Reddit all about sort of the forecast for the future of the business and how it looks pretty good. And if you look specifically at movies coming, if you look at the way they're managing their expenses, how much of their expenses are fixed or going up very slowly. And so at a time when revenues are going up, ticket prices are going up, more movies are coming, food and beverage spending has been going up, you know, I'm just not that focused on the price action. Yes, I sure wish that tomorrow I could wake up and have all the money I ever wished I had. We all want that. But day to day, the price action is not the business. And you got to remind yourself that over and over. The price action is not the business. And this is a heavily manipulated stock. There's a lot of day trading, there's a lot of shorting. We think there's some corruption. All of that's happening in the middle of all of this price action. But that's not impacting the day to day business. There are great movies coming. I have not changed my forecast. In fact, I'll be honest with you, the forecast I shared in that video, I've come to think it's even more conservative than I should have been. I'm leaving it up. I'd rather be conservative than spread false hope. But I guess my point is, I still believe there's 3 profitable quarters next year. I still believe that this quarter right now is already going to be the best earnings per share or bottom line earnings quarter of all of post COVID. And I'm not alone, actually. The entire industry, the financial industry, has forecast that. And so you just look and you go, even this quarter, only the third best box office, and yet it's going to be the best earnings profitability quarter. Still negative, but improving greatly. And so maybe I just encourage you, whether it's YouTubers flipping, YouTubers leaving, price action red, keep coming back to, well, the business is improving. They're turning profitable in the near future. Why would I leave? I'm not concerned. So that's where I'm at. And, take a look for yourself and be excited that Adam's got the tools he needs to keep this company going. All right. See you later.